A corrupt sheriff made the worst mistake of his career when he arrested a 68-year-old woman for feeding stray dogs. What he didn't know was that her son was a Navy SEAL, and neither man nor beast would let this injustice stand. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you want to support this channel, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. Pinewood Springs, Colorado sat wedged into the mountain valleys like a forgotten promise. Population 3,500 on a good day, less when winter came down hard from the peaks. The town had that particular stillness of places where hope left gradually, one closed storefront at a time. Late autumn had stripped the aspens bare, leaving skeletal branches clawing at a sky the color of gunmetal. Wind came down from the high country carrying the smell of coming snow and pine resin, cutting through layers of clothing with the persistence of a blade. The mountains rose on all sides, indifferent and eternal, their peaks already crowned with early snow that would stay until May. Pinewood Springs existed in their shadow, both literally and metaphorically, a place where the outside world felt distant and the old ways of doing things persisted long past their expiration date. Jack Mercer sat in his rented cabin 15 miles outside town, watching that same sky through a window that needed cleaning. He was 34 years old but carried himself with the stillness of someone much older, or perhaps someone who had seen too much too soon. 6'2", 210 pounds of lean muscle that moved with economy of motion, every gesture purposeful, nothing wasted. His hair was military short, dark brown shot through with premature gray at the temples. A scar ran across his left forearm, puckered and white, a souvenir from Helmand Province. But it was his eyes that marked him as different, watchful, constantly scanning, assessing, calculating angles and distances and threats that existed only as possibilities. Even here, in what passed for safety, Jack Mercer never truly rested. Beside him, Titan raised his head from massive paws. The German Shepherd weighed 95 pounds, dark sable coloring with a black mask and intelligent amber eyes that missed nothing. A piece of his left ear was missing, torn away in the same engagement that had scarred Jack's arm. They had served together for 6 years, 3 tours, countless operations that would never appear in any official record. Titan was not a pet. He was a partner, a weapon with fur and fangs, and loyalty that transcended the merely human. The dog's ears swiveled toward the door a full 3 seconds before Jack heard the vehicle approaching. Old habits. Titan rose to his feet, body language shifting from relaxed to alert without apparent effort. Jack's hand moved unconsciously toward the Glock 19 he kept within reach, even here, even now, even after 12 years of service had officially ended 23 days ago. Terminal leave, they called it. A strange phrase. Terminal suggested ending, death, finality. Jack had chosen this cabin, this isolation, this deliberate separation from everything and everyone, because after 12 years of constant noise and chaos and violence, he needed silence. Needed to remember what it felt like to exist without the weight of a mission, without brothers depending on him, without the knowledge that a single mistake meant death. The Corps had taught him to be a weapon. 3 years at SEAL Team 3, 2 at DevGru. He could kill a man in 17 different ways with his bare hands. Could shoot expert at 1,000 yards. Could operate in any environment, any condition, any level of chaos. But nobody had taught him how to stop being that weapon. How to exist in a world where the greatest threat was boredom and the loudest sound was wind in the trees. So he had come here. To decompress, the psychologist at Canand had said. To process. To integrate his experiences. To find peace. 6 months of terminal leave before his official separation date. 6 months to figure out who Jack Mercer was when he wasn't Chief Petty Officer Mercer, when he wasn't breaching doors in Fallujah, or calling in airstrikes in the Hindu Kush. 3 weeks in, he had learned that silence was louder than he'd expected. The vehicle came into view. A white Ford F-150, mud-splattered, Colorado plates. Jack watched it navigate the rutted dirt road that led to his cabin, cataloging details automatically. Single occupant, male. Moving too fast for the terrain, either local who knew the road or someone agitated enough not to care about their suspension. Titan's growl was subsonic, more vibration than sound. Easy, Jack said quietly. The dog's body remained tense, but the growls ceased. Communication between them required few words. After 6 years of operating together, in environments where noise meant death, they had developed a language beyond language. The truck pulled to a stop, 20 feet from the cabin. The man who emerged was mid-50s, weathered face, dressed in worn canvas jacket and work boots. Jack recognized him as Tom Patterson, who owned the cabin and the 40 acres it sat on. They had met exactly once, when Jack had paid 6 months' rent in advance with cash and made clear he valued privacy above all else. Patterson's face carried an expression Jack had seen too many times before. The look of a man bearing bad news and wishing desperately that he didn't have to. Jack opened the door before Patterson could knock. The older man started slightly, then recovered. "Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry to bother you." "No bother." Jack kept his body language neutral, unthreatening. He had learned that his presence, his physicality, his way of inhabiting space made some people nervous. Combat did that. Carved away everything soft until what remained was hard angles and coiled readiness. "Something wrong with the cabin?" No, nothing like that." Patterson shifted his weight, uncomfortable. It's just, well, this morning I was in town getting supplies and I heard something at the diner about Dorothy Mercer getting arrested." The world tilted slightly, then righted itself. Jack's expression didn't change. "Dorothy Mercer. Yes, sir, I know Mercer's not exactly an uncommon name, but given you're from out of state and all, I thought if she was family, you'd want to know." "What was she arrested for?" "Sheriff Crow got her for running an unlicensed animal shelter. Said she was keeping too many dogs, creating a public health hazard, trespassing because some of the dogs wandered onto neighboring properties." Patterson's expression suggested he didn't believe a word of it. "Dorothy's been feeding strays for years. Everybody knows it. She's got that property out on Forest Ridge Road, backs up to the National Forest. Must be 10 or 15 dogs she looks after. Never caused problems before." Jack's mind was already moving, processing, planning. Dorothy Mercer, his mother, 68 years old, widowed for a decade, living in the same house where Jack had grown up. The same woman who had raised him alone after his father died, who had supported his decision to enlist even as it terrified her, who had written him letters every single week for 12 years, no matter where he was deployed. The same woman he hadn't seen in person for 3 years because combat rotations and training and missions kept him away. And then because after everything, he hadn't known what to say to her. Hadn't known how to bridge the gap between who he'd been when he left and who he'd become. When did this happen? Jack's voice was level, controlled. "This morning, around 9. They took her right out of her house. I heard she's being held at the county jail, pending arraignment." Jack nodded once. "Thank you for letting me know." Patterson hesitated. "Sheriff Crow, he's got a reputation. Not a good one. If Dorothy is your mother, Mr. Mercer, she might need help, the kind a lawyer can provide." "I understand." Jack's tone made it clear the conversation was over. Patterson recognized dismissal when he heard it. He returned to his truck and drove away, navigating the rutted road with more care than he'd shown arriving. Jack closed the door, stood in the center of his cabin, in the silence he'd sought, and felt something he'd kept carefully buried begin to surface. Not panic. Seals didn't panic. But anger, cold and focused, the kind of anger that led to planning, to action, to violence when violence became necessary. Titan stood beside him, pressed against his leg, amber eyes fixed on Jack's face. The dog sensed the change, the shift from rest to readiness. Jack pulled out his phone. It took 3 tries to find his mother's number in his contacts. When had he last called? 6 months? Longer? The realization sat bitter in his mouth. He dialed. Voicemail. Her voice, cheerful and warm, asked him to leave a message. He didn't. Instead, he pulled up a browser and searched for Pinewood Springs Sheriff's Office. Found a number. Dialed. "Pinewood Springs Sheriff's Office. Deputy Miller speaking. I need information about Dorothy Mercer. She was arrested this morning. Are you family?" "I'm her son." A pause. "Hold, please." Muzak filled his ear. Titan's tail thumped once against the floor. Jack reached down, rested his hand on the dog's head. Solid, real, grounding. The voice that came back on the line was different. Deeper. carrying authority like a club. "This is Sheriff Crow. You're calling about Dorothy Mercer?" "I am. And you are?" "Jack Mercer, her son." "Well, Mr. Mercer, your mother is currently being held on multiple charges related to code violations and animal welfare laws. Her arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9. What's the bail?" "That'll be up to Judge Holbrook tomorrow. I want to see her." "Visiting hours are 2 to 4, afternoon only. You'll need to provide identification and submit to search." Crow's tone carried something Jack couldn't quite identify. Satisfaction, smugness. "Your mother made some poor choices, Mr. Mercer. Sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences." Jack's jaw tightened fractionally. "I'll be there at 2. He ended the call before Crow could respond. The drive into Pinewood Springs took 23 minutes, winding down from elevation through switchbacks that demanded attention. Jack drove his Jeep Wrangler with the same economy of motion he applied to everything else, Titan secured in the back, amber eyes watching the landscape roll past. The dog knew something had shifted. Animals always knew. The town materialized gradually, first as scattered houses clinging to the mountainside, then as something resembling a main street. Downtown Pinewood Springs consisted of 4 blocks of 2-story buildings, most dating from the 1950s. Half the storefronts were empty, windows soap-streaked or papered over. A hardware store, a diner called Martha's, a combination gas station and convenience mart. The county courthouse, stone and imposing, anchored the northern end. Adjacent to it, a brick building with bars on the windows and a sign reading Pinewood Springs Sheriff's Office. Jack parked 3 blocks away. Old habits. Never park directly at your destination. Always maintain escape routes. Always know the terrain. He walked the remaining distance with Titan at heel, drawing looks from the handful of people on the sidewalk, a man his size. Moving with that particular controlled grace, accompanied by a scarred combat dog, attracted attention whether he wanted it or not. The sheriff's office smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. A counter separated the public area from the bullpen beyond, where 3 desks sat arranged in a loose cluster. 2 men in tan uniforms looked up as Jack entered. Both were mid-30s. Both carried the soft look of men who'd never missed a meal or faced real danger. Their name tags read Miller and Dawson. "Help you?" Miller stood, positioning himself at the counter with body language meant to establish authority. It might have worked on civilians. "Jack Mercer. I called earlier about visiting Dorothy Mercer." Miller's expression shifted, something like recognition or perhaps wariness. "Right, your mother. You'll need to fill out this form, provide ID, and consent to search before entering the detention area." Jack produced his driver's license, filled out the form with precise block letters. When Miller moved to process it, Jack spoke quietly. "How is she?" "Ma'am's fine. 3 meals a day, clean cell, access to bathroom facilities." "That wasn't what I asked." Miller's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a door at the back opened and a man emerged who could only be Sheriff Raymond Crow. 6 feet tall, 240 pounds, gone to fat around the middle, thinning hair slicked back with too much product. He wore his uniform like a costume, badge polished to mirror brightness. His eyes were small and mean, the eyes of a man who enjoyed the power his position provided. "Mr. Mercer." Crow's smile didn't reach those eyes. "Wasn't expecting you until 2. "I'm early." "So I see." Crow's gaze moved to Titan, who sat perfectly still at Jack's left side. "That's a service dog?" "He's my dog. Can't bring animals into the detention area. Health code violation. He'll wait here. Deputy Dawson will need to secure him outside. He stays with me or waits in my vehicle. Those are the options." Jack's tone allowed no negotiation. Titan's ears swiveled toward Crow, and something in the dog's posture made the sheriff take an unconscious half-step back. "Fine, vehicle's fine." Crow recovered his composure. "Deputy Miller will escort you back once we've cleared you." The search was thorough and professional. Jack had expected nothing less. They found the Glock in his waistband holster, which he'd known they would. Colorado allowed concealed carry with permit. He provided the permit. They logged the weapon, secured it in a lockbox, provided him a receipt. "Military?" Dawson asked, running a metal detector wand over Jack's arms. "Navy. My cousin's Navy, stationed in San Diego." Jack didn't respond. Small talk felt like sandpaper against his nerves. Every minute standing here was a minute not seeing his mother. Not understanding what had really happened, not beginning to fix this situation, Miller led him through 2 locked doors into the detention area. The Pinewood Springs jail consisted of 6 cells arranged in 2 rows of 3. Only one was occupied. Dorothy Mercer sat on a concrete bunk, hands folded in her lap, back straight despite everything. She looked up as the door opened and her face transformed. Jackie. The name hit him like a physical blow. Nobody had called him that in 12 years. In the teams, he'd been Mercer or Chief or occasionally Reaper. But never Jackie. Never the name his mother had used when he was young and the world was simpler, and violence was something that happened far away to other people. Mom. His voice came out rougher than intended. Miller unlocked the cell. 15 minutes, he withdrew to the far end of the corridor, giving them the illusion of privacy while remaining within line of sight. Dorothy stood, and Jack saw the bruise on her left wrist, purple-black against her pale skin. Something cold and terrible moved through his chest. She followed his gaze, pulled her sleeve down quickly. It's nothing. I pulled away when they were putting the handcuffs on, that's all. Jack stepped into the cell. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes. The gray that had overtaken what used to be dark brown hair. 68 years old. When had she gotten old? She'd been strong and vital when he left, capable of anything. But 12 years of his absence sat between them like a physical barrier. Tell me what happened. Dorothy sat back down, gestured for him to join her. The bunk barely accommodated them both. I've been feeding the strays for about 3 years now. You know how it is in the mountains. People abandon dogs they don't want, or they wander away from properties and go feral. I started leaving food out, built some shelters on my property so they'd have somewhere warm and dry. How many dogs? 12, usually. Sometimes 15 if there are puppies. They don't bother anyone, Jackie. They stay on my property, and I make sure they're fed and healthy. Emma, the girl from down the road, she helps me sometimes. Sweet child, 16, wants to be a veterinarian. What did Crow charge you with? Operating an unlicensed animal shelter, creating a public health hazard, trespassing, because some of the dogs apparently wandered onto neighboring properties, though nobody's complained about it before. Her hands twisted in her lap. He came himself, Raymond Crow, with 3 deputies, made a whole show of it, reading me my rights like I was some kind of criminal. The neighbors were watching, Jackie. People I've known for 40 years. Watching me get arrested. The shame in her voice ignited something dark in Jack's chest. This is about something else. It wasn't a question. Dorothy's expression confirmed it. 5 years ago, Raymond's brother Vincent was driving drunk, killed a teenage boy, Tyler Harrison. I was driving behind him, saw the whole thing. I testified at the trial. Vincent got 8 years, served 5 with good behavior. He was released 2 months ago. The pieces assembled themselves with ugly clarity. Crow's retaliating. I think so, but I can't prove it. The charges are technically valid. I don't have the proper permits. And he's claiming the dogs are a nuisance, even though nobody's complained. Judge Holbrook will hear the arraignment tomorrow morning. Raymond and Marcus Holbrook are old friends, went to college together. What about a lawyer? I called David Chen. He handles most of the legal work in town. He said he'd represent me, but he didn't sound optimistic. Said I should consider pleading guilty, paying the fine, getting rid of the dogs. Her voice broke slightly on the last words. Those animals depend on me, Jackie. Nobody else will take care of them. If I get rid of them, they'll die of exposure before winter's out, or they'll starve, or someone will shoot them. Jack's jaw tightened. You're not pleading guilty to anything. I don't have much choice. There's always a choice. He stood, the cell suddenly too small to contain the anger building in his chest. Miller straightened at the end of the corridor, hand moving unconsciously toward his radio. Jack forced himself still, controlled his breathing, found the center of calm that had kept him alive through 100 firefights. Jackie, his mother's hand touched his arm. Don't do anything that'll make this worse. Please, I know what you've become, what the military made you. But this isn't Afghanistan. You can't just fix this with violence. He looked down at her, at the woman who'd raised him, who'd taught him right from wrong, who'd instilled in him the values that had made him volunteer for the most dangerous service in the military. She met his gaze without flinching. I won't make it worse, he said quietly. But I'm not letting this stand either. Time's up. Miller appeared at the cell door. Need to wrap this up. Jack stepped back. His mother stood, reached up to cup his face with both hands the way she'd done when he was a child. "I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure you would." The words cut deeper than any blade. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long. You're here now, that's what matters." Miller escorted him back through the locked doors. Crow was waiting in the front office, leaning against the counter with studied casualness. Short visit. Jack reclaimed his weapon, secured it without comment. Crow watched him with that same mean satisfaction. "Your mother's a stubborn woman, Mr. Mercer. Could have avoided all this if she'd just followed the law like everyone else. But some people think rules don't apply to them." Jack turned to face the sheriff directly. "What's the bail going to be?" "Like I said, that's up to Judge Holbrook. But between you and me," Crow's smile was ugly, "I'm recommending she be held without bail pending trial. Flight risk, you understand? She's got property she could liquidate, might decide to run rather than face consequences. She's 68 years old and lived in this town her entire life." "That's for the judge to decide." Crow's smile widened. "Arraignment's at 9 tomorrow morning. You're welcome to attend. It's a public hearing." Jack held the sheriff's gaze for 3 long seconds. Crow's smile faltered slightly. Whatever he saw in Jack's eyes made him straighten. Hand drifting unconsciously toward his sidearm. "I'll be there," Jack said quietly. He turned and walked out, every muscle in his body screaming for violence he couldn't yet unleash. Titan was waiting by the jeep, exactly where Jack had left him. The dog's tail wagged once, amber eyes questioning. Jack opened the door, and Titan jumped in with fluid grace. "We're not leaving," Jack told him. "Not yet." He drove 4 blocks to Martha's Diner, the only restaurant that appeared open. Inside, a handful of locals occupied booths, conversations dying as he entered. Jack took a corner booth that gave him line of sight to both entrances. Titan settled at his feet, invisible from most angles. A waitress approached, mid-20s, name tag reading Sarah. "Coffee? Please, and whatever your special is." She poured, hesitated. "You're Dorothy Mercer's son." "News travels fast. Small town, everyone knows everything." Sarah glanced over her shoulder, lowered her voice. "What they did to her wasn't right. Dorothy's good people. Best teacher I ever had back in elementary school. You know anything about why this is really happening?" Sarah's expression closed down. "I know what I know, but saying it out loud in this town can be dangerous. Sheriff Crow doesn't appreciate gossip." A bell chimed as the door opened. A girl entered, 16 or 17, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a high school varsity jacket. Her eyes found Jack. Widened slightly. She approached the booth with the careful steps of someone approaching a dangerous animal. "Are you Jack Mercer?" "I am. I'm Emma Rodriguez. I help Mrs. Mercer with the dogs." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you about what's really happening, but not here. Too many ears." Jack studied her. The girl was frightened, but beneath the fear was determination. "Where?" "The old mill, east side of town, in 1 hour." She glanced around nervously. "Please, Mrs. Mercer's in real danger, and I think I'm next." Before Jack could respond, she was gone, disappearing through the door with the speed of youth and terror. Sarah returned with food Jack barely tasted. His mind was already moving, planning, calculating. Not his fight, he'd told himself when he came here. Not his town, not his problem. But they'd made it his fight when they put hands on his mother. And now they were going to learn what happened when you backed a trained weapon into a corner with nothing left to lose. The old mill sat at the eastern edge of Pinewood Springs, where the town surrendered to forest. The structure dated from the 1930s, weathered timber and rusted corrugated metal, built when the lumber industry had given the town purpose. Now it was a skeleton, windows broken, roof sagging. Surrounded by weeds that had reclaimed the clearing where logs had once been processed. Jack arrived 15 minutes early, approaching from the north through tree cover. Old habits. Never arrive at a meeting without reconnaissance. Never enter a structure without knowing all the exits. Never trust that a situation is what it appears to be. Titan moved beside him in perfect silence, a shadow with teeth, trained to operate in hostile territory where a single sound meant mission failure or death. The mill showed no signs of ambush. Jack circled it twice, checking sightlines and approach vectors. The building had 3 entrances, main doors facing the road, a loading bay on the south side, a personnel door on the east wall. Woods pressed close on 3 sides, providing cover but also concealment for potential threats. He positioned himself inside the loading bay, where he could watch the main entrance while maintaining his own escape route. Titan settled into a down position, ears forward, every sense alert. They waited. Emma Rodriguez arrived precisely on time, parking a battered Honda Civic on the access road and approaching on foot. She moved with the nervous energy of prey in predator territory, constantly checking over her shoulder. Jack watched her enter through the main doors, saw her pause to let her eyes adjust to the dimness, saw the moment she spotted him and visibly relaxed. "Thank you for coming." Her voice echoed in the empty space. "I wasn't sure you would. You said my mother was in danger." Emma moved closer, footsteps crunching on debris. Up close, Jack could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. This girl was terrified. "Mrs. Mercer's been helping me for 2 years. I want to be a vet. And she lets me help with the dogs, teaches me about animal care. She's the kindest person I know. Tell me about the danger." Emma pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she navigated to a video file. 3 days ago, I was at Mrs. Mercer's place, helping feed the dogs. Sheriff Crow showed up with his brother Vincent. I hid in one of the dog shelters because Vincent scares me. He used to hang around the high school before he went to prison. Made comments to girls that were inappropriate. I recorded this. She handed Jack the phone. The video was shaky, shot through a gap in the wooden slats of a shelter, but the audio was clear. Crow's voice. "You've got 1 week to pack up and get out, Dorothy. I've got buyers lined up for this property, and you're standing in the way of progress." His mother's voice, steady despite the circumstances. "This is my home, Raymond. I'm not selling." Then Vincent's voice, rougher, uglier. "You put me in a cage for 5 years, you old bitch. Now it's your turn. Only your cage is going to be permanent." Crow again. "Now, Vincent, let's keep this civil. Dorothy, you're in violation of 6 county codes. I can make this easy, or I can make it impossible. Your choice." The video ended. Jack's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. "Send that to me." Emma did, thumbs flying across the screen. "There's more. I started asking around after Mrs. Mercer was arrested. In the past 3 years, 4 other families who owned property along Forest Ridge Road sold out and left town. The Hendersons, the Kims, the O'Briens, and the Vasquez family. I talked to Mrs. Henderson. She moved to Denver, but I found her number. She said Sheriff Crow made their lives hell. Constant harassment. Tickets for things that weren't violations. Their son got arrested twice on made-up charges. They sold just to escape." Jack's mind assembled the pattern with cold clarity. Crow wants the land. All the properties back up to National Forest. Together, they'd make perfect access for a private development, hunting lodge, something like that. But Mrs. Mercer won't sell, so he's forcing her out. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Mercer, 2 nights ago I saw Vincent's truck parked outside my house at 3 in the morning, just sitting there, engine off, watching. He's following me. I think because I'm a witness to what happened at Mrs. Mercer's. Have you told anyone else about this?" "Who would I tell? Sheriff Crow controls the police. Judge Holbrook is his friend. My parents are scared. They told me to stay out of it, that people like us can't fight people like them." Tears were streaming down her face now. But Mrs. Mercer never stayed out of it when someone needed help. She testified against Vincent, even though everyone told her not to. "Because it was the right thing to do. I can't just abandon her." Titan's head came up sharply, ears swiveling toward the main entrance. Jack's hand moved to his weapon as he processed what the dog had detected. Footsteps, multiple people, attempting stealth but failing. 3 separate gates, moving in tactical formation. "Get behind me," Jack said quietly. Emma obeyed without question, something in his tone communicating absolute authority. The main doors opened. 3 men entered, spreading out with the practiced coordination of people who'd worked together before. Jack recognized 2 from the sheriff's office, Deputies Miller and Dawson. The third was a civilian, mid-40s, prison tattoos visible on his forearms. Vincent Crow. Miller's hand rested on his sidearm, not drawing but making the threat clear. "Mr. Mercer, didn't expect to find you here. Funny, I could say the same about you." Jack's voice was level, but his body had shifted into a different configuration. Balanced, centered, ready. Titan was on his feet, body rigid, a low growl building in his chest. Vincent moved forward, that ugly smile Jack recognized from the video. "That's Emma Rodriguez cowering behind you. Little bitch has been spreading lies about my brother. Step back." Jack's tone could have frozen water. Vincent laughed. Or what? You'll sick your dog on a peace officer? That's assault, friend. That's a felony. I see 2 deputies and a convicted felon who should probably be violating parole by threatening a minor. I don't see peace officers. Miller's expression hardened. We got a call about suspicious activity at this location. We're investigating. You and the girl need to come with us. Answer some questions, downtown. We're leaving, not with you. Through that door. Jack gestured toward the loading bay behind him. You can try to stop us, but I promise you don't want to do that. Dawson's hand moved to his pepper spray. That's not how this works. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Dawson drew the spray. Jack moved, closing the distance with speed that caught all 3 men off guard. His hand locked around Dawson's wrist, hyperextending the joint, the pepper spray clattering to the concrete. A pivot, using Dawson's own momentum, and the deputy was on the ground, arm trapped in a submission hold that would shatter the elbow if he resisted. Miller drew his sidearm. Freeze! Guard! Jack's command was sharp. Titan launched, 95 pounds of trained aggression crossing the space in 3 bounds. The dog hit Miller's center mass, jaws locking around the deputy's gun arm. Not tearing, not mauling, but applying precisely calibrated pressure that sent the weapon spinning away as Miller went down screaming. Vincent pulled a knife, one of those tactical folders that opened with a flick of the wrist. He moved toward Emma with the ugly confidence of a man who'd hurt people before and enjoyed it. Jack released Dawson, crossed the distance in 2 strides, his hand intercepting Vincent's knife arm at the wrist. A twist, a rotation, leverage applied with mathematical precision against the joint, and Vincent was face down on the concrete, with his own knife at his throat and Jack's knee in his spine. Don't move. Jack's voice was absolutely calm. Any of you. The dog is trained to guard. If you reach for a weapon, he'll interpret that as a threat. You really don't want to find out what happens then. Titan stood over Miller, teeth still locked on the deputy's arm, growling continuously. Miller had gone absolutely still, his face white with pain and terror. Emma stood frozen, shock written across her features. Jack kept his eyes on the 3 men, his mind already processing next steps. This had just escalated from investigation to assault on law enforcement. The fact that they'd ambushed him and threatened a minor wouldn't matter in court, not in a town where Crow controlled the legal system. Emma, take your phone out. Record this, all of it. His voice cut through her shock. She fumbled for her phone, started recording. Jack looked down at Vincent, increased the pressure on the knife just slightly. You're going to tell me exactly what your brother is planning, every detail, and if you lie, I'll know. Vincent's breath came in gasps. You're dead. You're so dead. You just assaulted cops, you psycho. They entered a private structure with the intent to intimidate a witness. You pulled a knife on a minor. I defended myself and a juvenile. Now talk. Go to hell. Jack shifted his weight, pressure on Vincent's spine increasing. Medical training told him exactly how much force the vertebrae could withstand before structural damage occurred. He applied precisely 1 pound less than that threshold. Vincent screamed. Raymond wants the land, all 5 properties. Buyers from California offering $2 million for combined acreage. Development package, luxury hunting lodge, exclusive access. Your mother's the last holdout. Raymond tried legal pressure, code violations, social pressure. Nothing worked. So he's moving to stage 2. Fabricated arrest, bail denied, property seizure for code violations while she's locked up, then forced sale at auction. We get the land, buyers get their development, everyone profits, except my mother. Your mother should have taken the deal when it was offered. Now she gets nothing except a criminal record. Jack looked up at Emma, still recording. You get all that? She nodded, face pale but determined. Release. Titan let go of Miller's arm. Backed away 3 steps, remained in guard position. Miller clutched his arm, bite marks visible through the torn uniform sleeve, but no serious damage. Combat dogs were trained for controlled application of force. Jack stood, still holding Vincent's knife. He folded it, pocketed it. You're going to leave now, all 3 of you. And you're going to tell Sheriff Crow that if anything happens to my mother, to Emma, or to anyone else connected to this situation. That video goes to every news station in Colorado and the FBI field office in Denver. Are we clear? Miller struggled to his feet, cradling his arm. You just ended your life, Mercer. You can't assault law enforcement and walk away. I defended myself and a minor from an unlawful detention attempt by officers who failed to identify themselves or state cause. Colorado law is very clear about citizens' rights to resist unlawful arrest, but feel free to file charges. I'd love to see that video played in court. Dawson helped Vincent to his feet. All three men moved toward the entrance, Vincent looking back with murder in his eyes. This isn't over. Yes, Jack said quietly. It is. You just don't know it yet. They left. Jack waited until vehicle sounds faded before lowering his weapon. Emma was shaking, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Jack guided her to sit on a concrete pylon. Breathe, slow and steady, in through your nose, out through your mouth. She followed instructions, color gradually returning to her face. What you did, how you moved. I've never seen anything like that. 12 years of training. Emma, you need to send that video to 3 different email addresses right now. Your own, mine, and someone you trust who lives out of state. Then delete it from your phone. If they confiscate your phone, I don't want them finding the evidence. She did as instructed, fingers still trembling. When finished, she looked up at him with something like hope. Can you stop them? Can you really save Mrs. Mercer? Jack looked down at Titan, who sat at perfect attention, waiting for the next command. The dog's amber eyes met his, patient and loyal, and ready for whatever came next. They picked the wrong person to terrorize, Jack said quietly. And now they're going to learn what happens when you threaten family. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was attempted murder. And Jack Mercer was done trying to be a civilian Jack. Lee and Jack drove Emma home, following her Honda to ensure she arrived safely. Her house was a modest ranch on the south end of town, lights burning warm against the gathering dusk. He waited until she was inside before pulling away, Titan alert in the passenger seat, sensing the coiled tension in his partner. The cabin felt different when they returned. What had been a refuge now felt like a staging ground. Jack moved through the space with purpose, pulling gear from the duffel he'd kept packed out of habit. Tactical vest, night vision optics, med kit, zip ties, paracord. The tools of his former trade, kept close even in retirement because some instincts ran too deep to ignore. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Jack answered without speaking. Mr. Mercer, this is Deputy Sarah Chen. We met briefly at the station. The voice was female, young, frightened. I don't have much time. I'm calling from a burner phone because my work cell is monitored. You need to know what's happening. I'm listening. After you left the mill, Miller and Dawson came back. Their story is that you attacked them unprovoked, that you're unstable, dangerous. Sheriff Crow is putting out a bolo. Be on lookout, claiming you're armed and dangerous. He's planning to arrest you tomorrow before the arraignment. Make sure you can't speak on your mother's behalf. Jack's jaw tightened. You're risking your job telling me this. I became a cop to help people, not to be part of whatever corruption Crow is running. I've suspected for a year now that something's wrong, but I didn't have proof. Today I accessed the property records for Forest Ridge Road. All 4 families who sold in the past 3 years, their properties were purchased by a shell company called Mountain Vista Holdings. I traced the ownership. It's registered to Marcus Holbrook's wife. The conspiracy expanded with ugly clarity. The judge is in on it. I think so. And if Holbrook's involved, probably the DA too. This isn't just Crow being vindictive. This is organized corruption. They've done this before. They'll do it again. And your mother is just the latest victim. Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I have copies of the records, financial documents, everything I can access without triggering alerts. But I can't go to local authorities because I don't know who else is compromised. I need someone outside the system. FBI? I tried calling the Denver field office 2 weeks ago, reported suspicious activity. Never heard back. Either my report got buried or someone here has connections that killed the investigation before it started. Jack was already moving, pulling up contacts on his phone. I have people I can call. Federal connections outside normal channels. Can you get me those documents? I can email them from this burner. But Mr. Mercer, you need to understand what you're up against. Crow has 8 deputies, most of them loyal to him. He's got the judge, probably the DA, and half the town council in his pocket. You're one man. I've operated in worse odds. A pause. I heard you were Special Forces. Is that true? Navy, SEAL Team 3, then DevGru. Then maybe you have a chance. I'll send the files to whatever email you give me. But be careful. Crow's desperate now, and desperate men do stupid things. Your mother's arraignment is 9 tomorrow morning. If Holbrook denies bail, she'll be in county lockup for weeks waiting for trial. Anything could happen to her there. Jack provided his email address. Sarah, why are you doing this? Because 5 years ago, Dorothy Mercer was my teacher. She was the first person who told me I could be anything I wanted. That being a woman and Asian American didn't limit my options. She believed in me when my own parents thought being a cop was inappropriate for a girl. I owe her. Sarah's voice hardened with determination. And because if I don't stand up now, I'm just another corrupt cop looking the other way. That's not who I want to be. The call ended. Jack's phone chimed moments later with an email containing encrypted files. He downloaded them to his laptop, began reviewing. Property records, financial transfers, code violation reports. A pattern emerged. Each family targeted had received escalating harassment, citations for violations that appeared fabricated, until they sold at below-market rates. Mountain Vista Holdings purchased each property for roughly 60% of assessed value, a total investment of just under $900,000 for land now worth over $2 million. The profit motive was clear. But there was something else in the documents, something that made Jack's blood run cold. Building permits, filed 6 months ago, for a development called Forest Ridge Lodge. Luxury hunting resort, private access, 20 guest cabins plus main lodge. The permits had been approved by county commission, despite the fact that Mountain Vista didn't yet own all the necessary land. They'd been planning this for at least 6 months. His mother's arrest wasn't reactive. It was scheduled. They'd just been waiting for the right moment to spring the trap. Jack pulled up his contacts, found a number he hadn't called in 3 years. Commander Marcus Webb, his former CO at DevGru, now working at Naval Special Warfare Command. The call connected after 4 rings. Mercer, thought you were on terminal leave enjoying civilian life. Civilian life's complicated. I need a favor, Marcus. Name it. Jack outlined the situation in this fascinating notebook. Economical language. Webb listened without interrupting, the way he'd listened to mission briefs in a dozen forward operating bases. You're talking about a federal investigation, Webb said when Jack finished. Corruption, conspiracy, possibly civil rights violations. That's FBI jurisdiction. Local report went nowhere. I need someone who can bypass normal channels, go straight to the top. I know an assistant director at FBI, woman named Patricia Cross. She handles public corruption cases. I can make a call, but you need to understand what you're asking. If this goes federal, it's going to tear that town apart. Everyone involved goes down, not just the main players. Good. Webb was quiet for a moment. Your mother must be something special. She is. I'll make the call tonight. Cross will want to talk to you directly, probably send agents to interview witnesses and collect evidence. That'll take time, though. Maybe days. Can your mother hold on that long? She'll have to. Jack hesitated. Marcus, if something happens to me, I need you to make sure this gets followed through. I'm sending you the evidence files right now. Jesus, Mercer. What are you planning? Whatever's necessary. Another pause. You were the best operator I ever commanded. Smart, disciplined, lethal when you needed to be. But you're not in Afghanistan anymore. Rules are different stateside. You can't just eliminate the problem. I'm not planning to eliminate anyone, just making sure they understand the consequences of their choices. That's what worries me. Look, I'll get Cross on this tonight. But promise me you'll keep your head down. Let the system work. I know you don't trust it, but it does work, eventually. I'll do what I have to do to keep my mother safe. That's the only promise I can make. Jack ended the call, forwarded the encrypted files to Webb's secure email. Then he pulled up a topographical map of Pinewood Springs, studying terrain and access routes with the practiced eye of someone who'd planned 100 operations in hostile territory. The sheriff's office was a hardened target, brick construction, limited access points, always occupied. Crow's personal residence was outside town, isolated but probably equipped with security systems. His mother's property was vulnerable. Sitting at the end of a long driveway with woods on 3 sides, if Crow wanted to eliminate evidence or intimidate witnesses, that's where he'd strike. Jack marked positions on the map, calculating fields of fire and defensive positions. Titan watched him work, head cocked, sensing the shift from reconnaissance to active operation. A sound outside brought both their heads up. Titan was at the door before Jack could move, body rigid, a low growl building. Jack killed the lights, moved to the window, scanning the darkness through a gap in the curtains. A vehicle sat at the end of his driveway, lights off, engine running. As Jack watched, it rolled forward 20 feet, stopped again, testing, probing, determining if anyone was home. Jack's hand found his Glock, chamber check confirming the round seated. "Stay," he told Titan quietly. The dog held position, but every muscle was coiled spring-tight, ready to explode into action. The vehicle moved again, this time pulling fully into the driveway. Headlights snapped on, high beams flooding through the cabin windows. A spotlight joined them, the kind mounted on law enforcement vehicles, turning night into artificial day. A voice amplified through a PA system. "Jack Mercer, this is Sheriff Crow. We have a warrant for your arrest. Come out with your hands visible, and no one gets hurt." Jack's mouth tightened. No warrant existed, not legitimately. This was intimidation, an attempt to eliminate him before tomorrow's arraignment. He counted 3 vehicles now, 2 more pulling in behind Crow's, blocking the driveway. 6, maybe 8 men. All armed, all operating under color of law, which meant if Jack defended himself, he'd be painted as a cop killer. The tactical situation was untenable. He couldn't fight his way through that many armed men without lethal force. Couldn't surrender because he'd disappear into their custody and never make it to arraignment. Which left exactly one option. Jack moved through the cabin in darkness, muscle memory guiding him. Grabbed his go bag, already packed, threw in the laptop. Titan was at his side instantly, understanding without words that they were moving. The back door opened silently, well-oiled hinges making no sound. Jack and Titan slipped into the forest behind the cabin. Moving north through terrain, Jack had reconnoitered his first week here. Behind them, Crow's voice continued demanding surrender. They'd give him 60 seconds, maybe 90, before forcing entry. By then, Jack planned to be a quarter-mile away, moving through terrain where vehicles couldn't follow and men without night vision or training would struggle to navigate. As he moved through the darkness with Titan ghosting beside him, Jack's mind was already 3 steps ahead. They wanted to isolate him, eliminate his ability to interfere. Instead, they just freed him from any obligation to play by their rules. His mother's arraignment was in 14 hours. Between now and then, Jack Mercer was going to make absolutely certain that Sheriff Raymond Crow understood the difference between a civilian and a Navy SEAL. Behind them, the sound of splintering wood echoed through the night as deputies breached his cabin door. Jack smiled grimly and melted into the forest like a ghost, Titan matching his stride, 2 weapons moving as one toward objectives that Crow couldn't begin to anticipate. The hunted had just become the hunter, and these mountains were about to learn what war looked like when it came home. The forest at night was a living thing, full of sounds that most people never heard. Jack heard all of them. The rustle of pine needles under his boots, carefully placed to minimize noise. The distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through branches still clinging to the last brittle leaves of autumn. Behind him, flashlight beams cut through the darkness like searchlights, voices shouting coordinates and directions, men crashing through underbrush with all the subtlety of a freight train. They had no chance of catching him. Jack had spent 12 years operating in mountains, from Afghanistan to Yemen, terrain far more hostile than these Colorado forests. He moved like water, finding the path of least resistance, using terrain to mask his passage. Titan moved beside him in perfect silence, the dog's training so deeply ingrained that stealth was second nature. 2 miles north, Jack stopped at a granite outcropping that offered elevation and line of sight back toward his cabin. Through night vision optics, he watched the chaos below. 8 men, spread out in a search pattern that would have been adequate for finding a lost hiker, but was useless against someone with his training. Crow was there, directing operations with a radio, his bulk unmistakable even at this distance. Jack's phone vibrated. Text message from Sarah Chen, "They're saying you ran, claiming you're armed and dangerous. State Patrol has been notified. Where are you?" He typed back, "Safe. Need you to do something. Get to my mother's property before they do. I think it's the next target." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "That's outside my jurisdiction. Crow would know I was interfering. You're a sworn officer. You have authority anywhere in the county. And if I'm right, there's going to be a crime in progress that needs law enforcement response." A long pause. Then, "What are you planning?" "Making sure they can't destroy evidence or hurt innocent animals while my mother's locked up. You just need to be there to witness and document." This could cost me my job. Probably, but you'll be able to live with yourself. Another pause. Then, I'm heading there now. But Mercer, don't do anything that makes me have to arrest you for real. Jack pocketed the phone. Below, the search was breaking up, men returning to vehicles. They'd realized he was gone, that continuing to search in darkness was futile. The vehicles departed in a convoy, heading back toward town. Jack waited 15 minutes, ensuring no one had been left behind as a watcher, then began moving east through terrain he'd studied on topographical maps. His mother's property was 4 miles cross-country, much of it through national forest where no vehicles could follow. He reached the edge of her land 90 minutes later. Approaching from the north where forest met the 2-acre clearing she'd maintained for 40 years. The house sat dark and empty, a violation that made something cold move through Jack's chest. This had been his childhood home, the place where he'd learned to ride a bike and shoot a basketball and believe that the world was fundamentally good. Seeing it dark and abandoned felt like sacrilege. The dog shelters Dorothy had built were scattered across the property. Simple structures of plywood and tarp, each one providing warmth and protection from elements. Jack counted 12 dogs, moving between shelters, some sleeping, others alert and watchful. They'd noticed his presence, but hadn't barked, as if sensing he wasn't a threat. Titan's ears swiveled forward, body going rigid. Company approaching. Jack faded into shadows at the tree line, pulling the dog close. Quiet. Watch. 2 vehicles came up the long driveway without lights. Moving slowly, they parked near the house. 4 men emerged. Jack recognized Vincent Crow and 2 of the deputies from earlier, Miller and Dawson. The 4th was another civilian, heavily built, carrying something that caught moonlight. A gas can. Vincent's voice carried across the clearing. Burn the shelters first. Make it look like the dogs knocked over a heat lamp or something. Then the house. By the time anyone responds, whole place will be gone. Miller hesitated. Sheriff said, make it look accidental. Fire department's gonna investigate. They'll know if accelerant was used. So we make it look good. Spill some kerosene in the shelters, like Dorothy was trying to keep the dogs warm. Knocked it over. Spark from a lamp. Boom. Tragic accident. Vincent's laugh was ugly. And if any dogs don't make it out, well, that's just sad. Probably why the county has regulations about unlicensed shelters. Dawson moved toward the nearest shelter. A large mixed-breed dog growled, backing away. What do we do about the animals? Let 'em run. They'll scatter into the forest, probably starve or get shot by ranchers. Problem solved either way. Jack's hand tightened on Titan's collar, holding the dog back through sheer force of will. Every instinct screamed to intervene immediately, to stop what was about to happen. But he needed them to commit to the crime first, needed documentation that would stand up in federal court. He pulled out his phone, started recording video, zooming in on Vincent pouring accelerant around the first shelter. The dogs were agitated now, barking, sensing danger. The civilian was doing the same at a second shelter, methodical and thorough. Miller stood watch, clearly uncomfortable but not intervening. Dawson had moved toward the house, testing windows, looking for entry points. A new vehicle approached, this one with lights on, moving at normal speed. Sarah Chen's personal car, a Toyota sedan. She parked at the edge of the driveway, emerged in civilian clothes, but carrying her badge and service weapon. Sheriff's Department, what's going on here? Her voice carried authority despite the situation. Vincent turned, surprised. Deputy Chen, what are you doing here? Responding to a call about suspicious activity. This is Dorothy Mercer's property, and she didn't authorize anyone to be here. I need to see identification and an explanation for your presence. Miller stepped forward. We're executing a county code enforcement action. The property's been condemned due to health violations. At midnight, without the property owner present, show me the paperwork. We don't need to show you anything. This is official business. Sarah's hand moved to her weapon, not drawing but making her readiness clear. I'm a sworn deputy in this county. Official business requires documentation. Either produce it or clear the property. Vincent's expression turned ugly. You're making a mistake, Chen. You're new. You don't understand how things work here. Go home. Forget you saw anything. I understand perfectly how things work. Arson is a felony. Trespassing is a crime. And threatening a law enforcement officer is incredibly stupid. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling this in to State Patrol. They can sort out jurisdictional questions. The civilian with the gas can moved towards Sarah with clear intent. Jap was already in motion, Titan flowing beside him like a shadow given teeth and purpose. They covered the 50 yards in seconds, emerging from darkness so suddenly that no one had time to react. Down. Jack's command was sharp. Titan launched at the civilian, hitting him center mass, 95 pounds of controlled aggression driving the man to the ground. The gas can flew from his hands, contents spilling harmlessly across dirt. Jack's Glock was out, tracking between the 3 remaining men. Nobody move, hands where I can see them. Vincent's hand moved toward his waistband. Stay. The command froze him, Jack's weapon centering on his torso. Whatever you're reaching for, it's not worth dying over. Sarah had her weapon drawn now, covering Miller and Dawson. On the ground, all of you, hands behind your heads. You can't do this, Miller said. But he was already complying, the training overriding his loyalty to Crow. Sheriff's gonna have your badge. Probably, but at least I'll have a clear conscience. So pulled zip ties from her pocket, began securing prisoners with practiced efficiency. Jack kept his weapon trained until all 4 men were restrained, then moved to check the shelters. The dogs were agitated but unharmed, the accelerant not yet ignited. You recorded that? Jack asked Sarah. Every word. She held up her phone. Attempted arson, criminal trespassing, conspiracy to destroy evidence. Plus whatever else the DA wants to add. The real DA, not whoever Crow has in his pocket. Jack's phone rang. Commander Webb. He answered on speaker. Mercer, I've got good news. Assistant Director Cross is sending a team to Pinewood Springs. They'll be there at 0600. She wants you to meet them at the FBI field office in Denver. Brief them personally on the situation. Can't do it. Situation's deteriorated. There was an attempt to destroy my mother's property tonight. Arson with intent. I've got 4 suspects in custody, including Sheriff Crow's brother. A pause. You've got suspects in custody. You, personally. A civilian on terminal leave. Citizen's arrest. Colorado law permits it when a felony is committed in the presence of the arresting party. Deputy Sarah Chen is here as witness, and we've got video documentation of the entire event. Webb's sigh was audible. You couldn't just lay low for 12 hours? They didn't give me that option. My mother's arraignment is at 9 this morning. If I'm not there, Judge Holbrook will deny bail and she'll be vulnerable in county lockup. I need federal intervention before that happens. Stand by. The line went silent. Jack could hear muffled conversation, Webb speaking to someone else. Then he was back. Cross says she's redirecting the team to Pinewood Springs directly. ETA is 0530. She wants you to secure all suspects and evidence, maintain chain of custody, and be prepared for a full debriefing. She's also issuing a federal hold on Dorothy Mercer, which supersedes any county charges. Your mother will be released into federal protective custody, pending investigation. Relief hit Jack like a physical wave. Understood. And Mercer? Cross says to tell you that if you've contaminated her investigation by going cowboy, she'll personally ensure you face charges. So whatever you do in the next 5 hours, make it by the book. Always do. Jack ended the call, looked at Sarah. We need to transport these 4 to a secure location and guard them until federal agents arrive. Somewhere Crow can't interfere. Sarah thought for a moment. Community church. Pastor Grant will let us use the basement, and it's got 1 entrance we can defend. Plus, it's public enough that Crow can't just raid it without attracting attention. Let's move. They loaded the 4 prisoners into the 2 vehicles they'd arrived in, Sarah driving one, Jack the other. Titan in back, keeping watch over Vincent and the civilian. The dogs remained at Dorothy's property, confused but safe, no longer in immediate danger. The church sat dark when they arrived, but lights came on quickly after Sarah knocked. Pastor Grant appeared, elderly, white-haired, taking in the situation with remarkable calm. Deputy Chen, Mr. Mercer, I take it this has to do with Dorothy's situation. Yes, sir, Sarah said. We need a secure location to hold suspects until federal agents arrive. Can you help? Grant didn't hesitate. Dorothy taught Sunday school here for 30 years, helped more children than I can count. Bring them in. They secured the prisoners in the church basement, a large room used for community events, with only 1 entrance and windows too small to escape through. Jack and Sarah took turns on watch, 2 hours each, while the other rested. At 5:15, headlights appeared in the church parking lot. 4 black SUVs, government plates. Federal agents in tactical gear emerged, moving with the precision of professionals who knew their business. A woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, wearing an FBI windbreaker, approached. "Jack Mercer, I'm Assistant Director Patricia Cross. Commander Webb speaks highly of you. Let's talk about how we're going to dismantle the corruption in this town." Assistant Director Patricia Cross ran the briefing with military precision in the church meeting room. Laptop open, agents taking notes as Jack walked her through the conspiracy. He provided the financial documents Sarah had obtained, the video recordings from Emma and his own footage from tonight, the property records showing the shell company ownership. Cross listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder with each revelation. "This is bigger than local corruption," she said when Jack finished. "Wire fraud, conspiracy under color of law, civil rights violations, attempted arson, witness intimidation. We're looking at federal RICO charges if we can prove the pattern of racketeering." She looked at Sarah. "Deputy Chen, you understand you'll be a primary witness in this case. Your career with Pinewood Springs Sheriff's Department is effectively over." Sarah's jaw was set. "I understand. But I didn't become a cop to watch criminals wear badges." Cross nodded approvingly. "We'll make sure you're placed somewhere that values integrity. Jack, your mother's arraignment is in 3 hours. Judge Holbrook doesn't know we're here yet, and I want to keep it that way until we've secured all the major players. Here's what's going to happen." She pulled up a tactical map of Pinewood Springs on her laptop. At 0800, 2 teams will execute arrest warrants on Sheriff Raymond Crow and Judge Marcus Holbrook simultaneously. 3rd team secures the sheriff's office and seizes all records before anyone can destroy evidence. 4th team extracts Dorothy Mercer from county lockup and places her in protective custody. "What about Vincent Crow and the deputies we're holding here?" Jack asked. "They'll be transported to federal holding facility in Denver within the hour. Their arrests are leverage. Once Raymond Crow knows his brother is facing federal arson charges, he might decide cooperation is preferable to decades in prison." Cross fixed Jack with a sharp look. "I need you to stay out of the way for the next 3 hours. You've done good work, but you're also a witness, and I can't have you contaminating the operation. Go home, get some rest, and let us handle this." Jack's expression didn't change. "With respect, ma'am, I'm not leaving until I see my mother safe." "That wasn't a request, Chief Petty Officer. I'm on terminal leave. You don't have command authority over me." Cross and Jack locked eyes for a long moment. Then she smiled thinly. "Webb warned me you are stubborn. Fine, you can ride with the extraction team as an observer only. But if you interfere with federal agents performing their duties, I will have you arrested for obstruction. Are we clear?" Crystal. The next 2 hours passed in controlled chaos. Federal agents secured the 4 prisoners from the church basement, loaded them into vehicles for transport to Denver. Emma Rodriguez was collected from her home, placed in protective custody despite her parents' protests. Pastor Grant provided coffee and breakfast sandwiches, moving through the organized chaos with the serene calm of someone who'd seen everything in 40 years of ministry. At 7:45, the teams moved out. Jack rode in the 3rd SUV with 4 agents, Titan in the cargo area, heading toward the county jail. The building sat adjacent to the sheriff's office, both structures about to be swarmed by federal law enforcement. The radio crackled. Team 1 in position at Crow residence. Team 2 in position at Holbrook residence. Team 3 ready to breach sheriff's office. Cross's voice came over the radio from the command vehicle. "All teams, this is Cross. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute." What happened next was choreographed violence, federal agents executing simultaneous raids with overwhelming force. Through his window, Jack watched 8 agents in tactical gear breach the sheriff's office front entrance while another team secured the rear. No shots fired, no resistance. The overnight deputy on duty surrendered immediately when confronted with automatic weapons and federal warrants. The extraction team pulled up at the county jail's side entrance. The agent in charge, a man named Rodriguez, gestured for Jack to follow. "Stay behind us. Don't touch anything. Don't speak unless spoken to." The jail's night supervisor was a woman in her 50s, heavy-set, wearing a uniform that had seen better days. She looked up from her desk as 6 federal agents entered, weapons holstered but badges prominently displayed. FBI, we're here to extract a federal witness from your custody, Dorothy Mercer. Bring her to intake now. The supervisor's face went pale. I need to contact Sheriff Crow. This isn't proper procedure. Agent Rodriguez placed a document on her desk. Federal court order signed by District Court Judge Henderson. It supersedes any local authority. Bring Mrs. Mercer now or face obstruction charges. The woman picked up her phone with shaking hands. Rodriguez placed his hand over it. No calls, no warnings, just bring us the prisoner. 5 minutes later, Dorothy Mercer emerged from the detention area, escorted by a guard who looked thoroughly confused. She was still wearing the clothes she'd been arrested in 2 days ago, hair disheveled, but her back was straight and her eyes clear. Then she saw Jack and her composure cracked. Jackie. Jack stepped forward, every regulation forgotten. His mother's arms went around him, and for a moment he was 8 years old again, seeking comfort after a nightmare. Except now he was the one providing protection, and the nightmare was real. It's over, Mom. The FBI is here. You're safe. Dorothy pulled back, tears streaming down her face. What did you do? What I had to. Agent Rodriguez cleared his throat. Ma'am, we need to move. This facility isn't secure. They escorted Dorothy out to the waiting SUV. As they emerged into morning light, Jack saw the chaos unfolding across the street. Sheriff Raymond Crow was being led from his office in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents, his face purple with rage. Other deputies stood in shocked clusters, watching their world collapse. Crow's eyes found Jack across the parking lot. Even at this distance, the hatred was palpable. He shouted something, words lost in the commotion, struggling against the agents holding him. They forced him into a vehicle with professional efficiency. Dorothy watched. Touched from the SUV, her hand finding Jack's. Is this real? Is this really happening? It's real. They can't hurt you anymore. A commotion erupted at the courthouse. Judge Narcus Holbrook was being perp-walked down the steps, hands cuffed behind his back, his distinguished appearance now thoroughly demolished. A crowd was gathering, townspeople emerging from shops and homes, phones out recording everything. Assistant Director Cross approached the SUV, leaned in through the open door. Mrs. Mercer, I'm Patricia Cross, FBI. You're being placed in protective custody until we conclude our investigation. We have a safe house prepared where you'll be comfortable. Your son will be allowed supervised visits. What about my dogs? The strays, they need to be fed. They'll be frightened. Cross's expression softened slightly. We've arranged for a local veterinarian to provide care until the situation is resolved. Your property is now a crime scene, but the animals will be looked after. A deputy Jack didn't recognize approached, hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. Young, early 20s, wearing a uniform that looked too new. Ma'am, Mrs. Mercer, I'm Deputy Collins. I just want to say, back in 2015, you were my 5th grade teacher. You helped me with my reading when everyone else said I was too slow to learn. I just want you to know. Not all of us knew what Sheriff Crow was doing. Some of us are good cops. Dorothy's smile was gentle despite everything. I know, Tommy. I've always known. The extraction team drove Dorothy to a hotel in Colorado Springs, 40 miles south, where federal marshals would maintain security. Jack was allowed to ride along, tightened between them, the dog's presence seeming to comfort Dorothy almost as much as her son's. In the hotel room, decorated in generic corporate style but clean and safe, Dorothy finally allowed herself to collapse. She sat on the bed, shoulders shaking with exhaustion and relief. Jack sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, feeling the weight of 2 days of terror and uncertainty flowing out of her. I thought I was going to lose everything, she whispered. The house your father and I bought together, the land where you learned to ride a bike, the dogs who depend on me. I thought Crow would take it all, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. He underestimated you. You raised a son who doesn't quit when things get hard. Dorothy looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time since his return. What happened to you over there, in all those places you couldn't tell me about? I learned what I was capable of, good and bad. I learned that sometimes the only thing standing between innocent people and evil is someone willing to fight. Are you okay? Really okay? Jack was quiet for a long moment. I came here to hide, Mom. To escape from what I'd become. what the service made me. I thought if I could just be alone long enough, silent enough, maybe I could find peace. But watching them hurt you, watching corruption flourish because good people were too scared to fight back, I realized something. What? Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's knowing you stood up when it mattered. You taught me that. When you testified against Vincent Crowe 5 years ago, when everyone told you to stay silent, you stood up. You showed me what real courage looks like. Dorothy's hand cupped his scarred face. You were always courageous, Jackie. Even as a little boy, you protected the kids who got bullied, stood up to injustice even when it cost you. The military didn't make you a protector. It just gave you the skills to be what you always were. A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Rodriguez. Mrs. Mercer, we're setting up a secure video link so you can give your statement to Assistant Director Cross. It'll take a few hours, and we'll need details about everything that happened, everyone involved. Are you up for that? Dorothy straightened, wiping her eyes, that core of steel reasserting itself. I am. Let's make sure they can never do this to anyone else. Jack stood to leave, give her privacy for the debriefing. Dorothy caught his hand. Where are you going? Back to Pinewood Springs. There are still loose ends. Jackie, the FBI said to let them handle it. They will handle the legal side. But there's something I need to do first. Someone I need to talk to. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. I'll be back tonight. I promise. Outside, the morning sun was burning off the last of the night's cold. Jack climbed into his Jeep, Titan settling into the passenger seat with familiar ease. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number he'd found in the documents Sarah provided. A woman's voice answered. Henderson residence. Mrs. Henderson? My name is Jack Mercer. I'm Dorothy Mercer's son. I understand Sheriff Crowe forced your family to sell your property 3 years ago. I'd like to talk to you about getting justice. A long pause. Then, quietly. I thought we were the only ones. I thought nobody would believe us. You weren't the only ones, and now everyone's going to believe you. Can you put me in touch with the other families? The Kims, the O'Briens, the Vasquez family? I can. Mr. Mercer, is it really over? Can we really come home? It's over, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what was done to you. Every family, every victim, every act of corruption, it's all coming to light. When the call ended, Jack sat in his Jeep for a moment, Titan's head resting on his leg. The dog's amber eyes looked up at him with infinite patience and loyalty. Just one more thing to do, Jack told him. Then maybe we can both find some peace. He started the engine and headed back toward the mountains, toward a town that was learning what happened when good people decided they'd had enough of corruption. And when a Navy SEAL came home to protect the person who mattered most, Pinewood Springs looked different in daylight with federal agents occupying the sheriff's office. News vans had arrived from Denver and Colorado Springs, reporters setting up on the courthouse steps, their cameras capturing the systematic dismantling of local government corruption. Jack watched them, his Jeep parked 2 blocks away, noting the crowd that had gathered, townspeople drawn by the spectacle of their leaders being arrested. His phone rang. Sarah Chen, voice exhausted but carrying an edge of satisfaction. They arrested the district attorney an hour ago. Martha Yates, she'd been signing off on fraudulent prosecutions for 2 years. Also 3 county commissioners and the head of code enforcement. Cross says there might be 20 indictments before they're finished. How are you holding up? I'm officially suspended pending investigation, which is standard procedure when an officer cooperates with federal authorities against their department. But Cross assured me I'll be cleared, probably offered a position with a clean department somewhere in the state. A pause. I keep thinking about all the families who suffered because I didn't act sooner. The Hendersons, the Kims, all of them. I knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself I couldn't fight the system alone. You fought when it mattered. That's what counts. You taught me that. Watching you refuse to back down, even when they came after you with everything they had. I've never seen anything like it. Jack ended the call, climbed out of the Jeep. Titan followed, drawing immediate attention from the crowd. People recognized him now, the stranger who'd appeared and somehow triggered the collapse of Crowe's empire. Conversation stopped as he walked down the sidewalk toward the community church. Pastor Grant was inside, organizing donation boxes. The church had become an impromptu community center, people bringing food and supplies for families affected by the arrests. Grant looked up as Jack entered, smiled with genuine warmth. "Jack, your mother's well, I hope? Safe with federal protection." "I wanted to thank you for helping last night. You took a significant risk. Dorothy taught my children when they were young, showed them kindness when my family was struggling financially, never made them feel less than the wealthy kids. I would do far more for her than provide basement space for a few hours." Grant set down the box he was organizing. "The town is in shock. Half the government arrested. Everything they thought was stable revealed as corrupt. People don't know what to believe anymore. They can believe the truth, that corruption flourishes when good people stay silent and dies when someone has the courage to speak. Is that what you came here to tell them?" Jack was quiet for a moment. "I came here to hide from who I was, to escape the violence, the constant missions, the weight of responsibility. I thought isolation would bring peace. Instead, I found people suffering while their protectors had become predators. My mother taught me that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. I couldn't stay silent. She taught many of us that lesson. Most of us forgot it until you reminded us." Grant gestured toward the window, where the crowd outside continued to grow. "They're calling you a hero, the man who stood up to Crow when no one else would. I'm not a hero. I just did what needed doing. That's precisely what makes you one." Jack left the church, walked through the crowd toward his mother's property. People tried to stop him, shake his hand, thank him. He deflected politely but firmly, Titan's presence helping create space. 4 miles later, he stood in the clearing where he'd grown up, looking at the house that had been his childhood home. Federal evidence tape marked it as a crime scene, but the dogs were there, fed and comfortable. A veterinarian Jack didn't know was examining a German Shepherd mix. Gentle and professional, she looked up as Jack approached. "You must be Jack Mercer. I'm Dr. Lisa Warren. The FBI asked me to ensure the animals were cared for properly. Your mother did remarkable work here. These dogs were feral, dangerous, and she gentled them through patience and consistency. It's extraordinary." Jack watched the dogs, some sleeping in the shelters his mother had built by hand, others playing in the afternoon sun. She believes everything deserves a chance. People, animals, doesn't matter. If they're vulnerable and need help, she helps. The world needs more people like her, and like you, if the stories I'm hearing are true. What stories? That you came home and single-handedly brought down a corrupt sheriff, saved your mother, and exposed a conspiracy that had terrorized this town for years. People are calling it the most dramatic thing to happen in Pinewood Springs since the mine collapse of 1968. Jack's mouth twitched, almost a smile. It wasn't single-handed. A lot of people were brave. Sarah Chen, Emma Rodriguez, even you, taking care of these animals when you could have stayed uninvolved. Dr. Warren returned to her examination. "Your mother can come home soon, I think. Once the FBI finishes processing the scene, I'll make sure the dogs are ready for her return." Jack spent an hour repairing one of the shelters damaged during the attempted arson, his hands remembering the carpentry his father had taught him decades ago. Physical work, purposeful and concrete, helped order his thoughts. Titan explored the property, investigating every cent, occasionally checking back to ensure Jack was still there. His phone rang. Assistant Director Cross. "Mercer, I need you at the federal building in Denver tomorrow morning for a full debriefing. We're building cases against 23 individuals, and your testimony is crucial to establishing the timeline and conspiracy scope. I'll be there." Your mother's statement was comprehensive. She documented every interaction with Crow over the past 3 years, every threat, every instance of harassment. Combined with the financial records and video evidence, we have an airtight case. Sheriff Crow is looking at 30 years minimum. Judge Holbrook, 25. The others, varying sentences, but everyone involved is going to prison. What about the families they forced out? That's complicated. The property sales were technically legal, even if coerced through criminal harassment. But we're working with the state attorney general on a restitution package. The families will be compensated, possibly allowed to repurchase their properties at the original sale price. It'll take time, but we're committed to making them whole. And Dorothy's charges? Dismissed with prejudice. She'll receive a formal apology from the governor's office. We're also recommending her for a state commendation for her courage in standing against corruption. Cross paused. You did good work here, Mercer. Unconventional, occasionally reckless, but effective. Have you considered a career in federal law enforcement? We could use people with your skills and integrity. I have another month of terminal leave. After that, I'm not sure what comes next. Well, if you decide you want to keep fighting the good fight, you have my number." Jack ended the call, sat on the porch steps of his mother's house. The sun was lowering toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Titan settled beside him, warm and solid, the dogs breathing steady and calm. A car approached up the driveway. Emma Rodriguez, driving her battered Honda. She parked, emerged with the careful uncertainty of someone who'd been through trauma and wasn't sure how to process it. Jack stood as she approached. "Mr. Mercer, I wanted to thank you for believing me, for protecting me, for everything. You were brave, Emma. Recording that conversation, standing up when adults around you chose silence. That took real courage. I was terrified. I'm still terrified. But Mrs. Mercer always said courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action despite fear. I kept thinking about that, about what she would do, and it helped." Emma's eyes were wet. "Is she really coming home?" "Soon, maybe a week. Once the investigation wraps up, I'll be here to help with the dogs. I already told Dr. Warren I'd volunteer every day after school." Emma looked around the property, at the shelters and the animals and the house. "This place was the only spot I felt safe. My parents are good people, but they're scared of everything. Scared of taking risks, or standing out or making waves. Mrs. Mercer taught me that some things are worth the risk. What will you do now? Keep studying. Keep working toward being a veterinarian. And maybe, when I'm older, I'll be the kind of person who stands up like you and Mrs. Mercer did. Someone who makes a difference." Jack watched her drive away. This 16-year-old girl who'd risked everything to do what was right. The future, he thought, might be in good hands after all. The evening settled into full darkness. Jack made a final circuit of the property, ensuring the dogs were secure and comfortable. Then he and Titan returned to the Jeep, heading back toward his cabin. The structure looked different after federal agents had searched it. They'd been professional, nothing damaged, but the space felt violated. Jack stood in the center of the main room, looking at the place where he'd sought peace and found purpose instead. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Jackie, they're letting me come home tomorrow. Can you be there?" He typed back, "I'll be there. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in 12 years, that felt like truth instead of obligation. He wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't running from who he'd become. The violence he'd learned, the skills he developed, the instincts that had kept him alive through 100 missions, all of it had purpose beyond war, protection, justice, standing between the vulnerable and those who would prey upon them. His mother had taught him that lesson before he'd ever picked up a weapon. The military had just given him the tools to make it effective. Jack looked down at Titan, who watched him with those patient amber eyes. "What do you think, partner? Ready to go home?" Titan's tail thumped once against the floor. In the language they'd developed over 6 years of combat and brotherhood, it meant yes, meant always, meant wherever you go, I follow. Jack smiled, a real smile this time, and began packing his gear. Tomorrow he'd bring his mother home. Tomorrow they'd start rebuilding what Crow had tried to destroy. Tomorrow, the town of Pinewood Springs would begin healing from years of corruption. But tonight, for the first time since returning from his last deployment, Jack Mercer felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the knowledge that when conflict came, he'd stood on the right side. That he'd protected those who couldn't protect themselves. That he'd honored the values his mother had instilled and the oath he'd sworn when he joined the service. Outside, the Colorado night was clear and cold, stars brilliant against the darkness. And in that darkness, a warrior finally found the rest he'd been seeking, not through isolation, but through purpose, through doing what was right, no matter the cost, through being the man his mother had raised him to be. 3 months later, Pinewood Springs looked like a town learning to breathe again. The sheriff's office had been reorganized under state oversight, staffed with deputies transferred from clean departments across Colorado. Sarah Chen had been promoted to interim sheriff, the youngest in the state, tasked with rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the community. The courthouse operated under the supervision of visiting judges, while the state appointed permanent replacements for those who'd been arrested. Rested, Jack stood on his mother's porch, watching her move through the clearing with a bucket of food, the dogs converging around her with tails wagging and genuine affection. 12 dogs now, down from 15. 3 had been successfully adopted to families Emma Rodriguez had carefully vetted. The remaining animals were healthy, well-fed, and properly registered under the new animal welfare permits Dorothy had obtained through legitimate channels. The house had been repaired and updated, insurance covering the damage from the attempted arson and then some. Fresh paint, new roof, windows that actually sealed against winter cold. Dorothy had protested the expense until Jack reminded her that the settlement from the state's restitution fund more than covered it. She donated half of her settlement to establish a scholarship for students pursuing veterinary medicine. The first recipient was Emma Rodriguez. Titan lay at Jack's feet, graying slightly around the muzzle now, content in the afternoon sun. The dog had adapted to civilian life better than Jack had expected, though he remained alert, always watching, always ready. Some training went too deep to ever fully fade. A vehicle pulled up the driveway, Sarah Chen's personal car, though she wore her sheriff's uniform now, the star on her chest still shiny and new. She emerged with a file folder, expression serious but not grim. "Jack, Mrs. Mercer, wanted to give you an update in person." Dorothy came over, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Come inside, dear. I just made coffee." In the kitchen that smelled of fresh baking and coffee, Sarah spread papers across the table. "The trials are moving forward. Sheriff Crow and Judge Holbrook both refused plea deals, so they're going to trial next month. The district attorney thinks it's arrogance. They still believe they can beat the charges. They're wrong." "What about Vincent?" Dorothy asked. Vincent Crow pleaded guilty to arson, conspiracy, and assault. He's looking at 15 years federal prison. He'll be 73 when he gets out. Sarah's expression was professionally neutral, but satisfaction leaked through. Deputy Miller and Dawson both took deals, testifying against the others in exchange for reduced sentences. 3 years each, plus permanent ban from law enforcement. Jack sipped his coffee. "And the families?" "All 4 families have been contacted about repurchasing their properties at original sale prices. The Hendersons are coming back next month. The Kims are considering it. O'Brien's decided to stay in Arizona, but they're accepting financial compensation. Vasquez family wants their land back, already working with contractors on rebuilding." Sarah closed the folder. "It's not perfect justice, but it's something. More than they had 3 months ago." Dorothy reached across the table, squeezed Sarah's hand. "You're doing good work, dear. The town is lucky to have you. The town is lucky you didn't give up. If you'd taken Crow's deal, sold your property and left, none of this would have come to light. How many more families would have been victimized?" Sarah looked at Jack. "And we're lucky your son came home when he did." After Sarah left, Dorothy and Jack walked the property together, Titan ranging ahead, investigating scents and sounds with the thorough attention of a professional security asset who happened to have fur. "You've been restless lately," Dorothy observed. "Something on your mind?" Jack was quiet for a moment. "My terminal leave ends next week. I have to make a decision about what comes next. Full separation from the Navy, or request a transfer to Training Command, stay in for another few years." "What do you want?" "Part of me wants to stay in. It's what I know. What I'm good at. The structure, the purpose, the mission. Civilian life still feels foreign. And the other part?" Jack stopped walking, looked at the mountains rising on all sides, the forest where he'd grown up exploring, the town in the valley below. "The other part remembers what it felt like to make a difference here. Not in some distant country fighting someone else's war, but home, protecting people I know, values I understand." Assistant Director Cross offered me a position with the FBI, training role initially, possibly field work later if I want it. Dorothy studied her son's face, seeing things a mother always saw. The trauma he carried, the weight of 12 years at war, but also something new. Hope, maybe. Purpose that didn't require deployment to hostile territory. "What does your heart tell you?" "That I spent 12 years learning to be a weapon. Maybe it's time to learn to be something else. Still a protector, still serving, but in a way that doesn't require me to be gone for months at a time, missing the people and places that matter." "Then that's your answer." Dorothy's smile was warm. "Your father would be proud of you. Not because you became a SEAL, not because of the medals or the missions, but because when it mattered most, You chose to protect the vulnerable. That's the man we raised. That's the man you've always been. They walked back to the house as the sun lowered toward the western peaks. Inside, Jack's phone rang. Commander Webb. Mercer, got your separation paperwork. You're sure about this? I am. Hate to lose you. Best operator I ever commanded. But I understand. The war changes us all, and knowing when to transition out is as important as knowing when to fight. Webb paused. Patricia Cross tells me you accepted her offer. FBI's lucky to have you. Thank you, sir. For everything. For believing in me. For training me. For making the call that saved my mother. You saved your mother, Jack. I just made an introduction. What you did after that, the courage and integrity you showed, that was all you. Webb's voice softened slightly. Take care of yourself out there. And if you ever need anything, you call. Brotherhood doesn't end with separation papers. The call ended. Jack stood in his childhood kitchen, watching his mother prepare dinner, Titan lying in the spot he'd claimed as his own by the fireplace. This house, this town, this life, it all felt real in a way nothing had felt real since his first deployment. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma Rodriguez. Mrs. Mercer, can I come help with evening feeding? Also wanted to show you my acceptance letter to CSU veterinary program. Dorothy read the message over his shoulder, her face lighting up. Tell her yes. Of course. And tell her to stay for dinner. I'm making enough for an army. As Jack typed the response, he realized something fundamental had shifted. For 12 years, he'd been defined by what he did in darkness, in places whose names he couldn't speak, against enemies whose faces blurred together. He'd been a ghost, a weapon, a tool of national policy. But here, in this small mountain town, he'd been simply Jack, Dorothy's son, a man who stood up for what was right, a protector who fought not for geopolitical strategy but for his mother, for a frightened teenage girl, for stray dogs who depended on human kindness. Maybe that had always been the real mission. Not the operations, the firefights, the tactical objectives, but this, standing between the vulnerable and those who would prey upon them, using his skills not for destruction but protection, being the person his mother had raised him to be. Emma arrived as the sun set, bubbling with excitement about her acceptance letter, about the dogs, about how different the town felt now that people weren't afraid of their own government. She helped Dorothy with the feeding while Jack started the grill, the ritual of a simple dinner with people he cared about, feeling more meaningful than 100 combat decorations. Over dinner, Emma talked about her plans, her dreams of opening a practice that focused on rescue animals and wildlife rehabilitation. Dorothy offered advice and encouragement, the natural teacher in her emerging. Jack listened, contributed occasionally, mostly just absorbed the normalcy of it all. After Emma left, after the dishes were cleaned and the dogs settled for the night, Dorothy sat beside Jack on the porch steps. Titan dozed at their feet, the dogs breathing steady and peaceful. You know what I'm proudest of? Dorothy asked quietly. What? That you came home, not just physically, but really came home. So many soldiers can't find their way back, stay trapped in the war even after it's over. But you found your way. You remembered who you are beneath the uniform and the training. Jack was quiet for a long moment. I almost didn't. I came here planning to hide, to be alone, to somehow make peace with everything I'd done and seen. I thought isolation was the answer. What changed? You needed help. And I realized that running from who I'd become wasn't the answer. Accepting it, integrating it, using it for something good, that was the answer. I'm always going to be a warrior, Mom. That's not something I can turn off. But I can choose what I fight for, who I protect, how I use what the military made me. The military didn't make you a protector, Jackie. It just gave you the skills to be what you always were. Even as a little boy, you stood up for others. Fought against injustice, refused to back down when you knew you were right. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. Later, lying in his old bedroom with Titan on the floor beside the bed, Jack thought about the future. FBI training at Quantico starting in 3 weeks. A new purpose, a new mission. But this time, fighting for communities like Pinewood Springs, protecting people like his mother, ensuring that corruption and abuse of power were met with overwhelming justice. His phone glowed in the darkness. Message from Sarah Chen. Quiet night in Pinewood Springs. First time I can remember saying that in years. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Jack typed back, "You showed yourself. You just needed someone to stand with you." He set the phone aside, closed his eyes, and for the first time in 12 years, slept without nightmares. 3 weeks later, Jack stood in his mother's driveway beside his packed Jeep, Titan already secured in the passenger seat. Dorothy held him tight, tears streaming but her smile genuine. "You call me every week, and visit when you can, and remember that no matter where you go or what you do, you always have a home here." "I will, and Mom, thank you for teaching me what really matters, for being the example I needed when everything else was chaos. Go make me proud, again." Jack climbed into the Jeep, started the engine. As he drove down the mountain road, Pinewood Springs disappearing in the rearview mirror, he thought about the journey ahead. New challenges, new battles, new opportunities to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Because somewhere out there, another person was waiting for someone to help them, to stand with them, to show them that courage and integrity still mattered in a world that often seemed devoid of both. And when duty called, Jack Mercer would answer, not as a weapon, as a guardian. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Tell us what you would have done in Jack's situation. Would you have fought back, or would you have stayed silent? Because sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stand up for what's right. One person who refuses to let evil flourish unchallenged. One person who remembers that the strongest weapon isn't training or skills or experience. It's the courage to act when action is needed most. May you find that courage in your own life. May you stand up when others sit down. And may you always remember that being a hero isn't about strength or power. It's about choosing to protect those who cannot protect themselves. God bless you all, and until the next story, remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action despite it.